we looked at our reform line. This is just a portion of it. And what I've done is I've taken the line of the 144,000 and I've just taken a portion of that line. I've taken from 2014 to Daniel 11 verse 41. What we call the National Sunday Law. And the reason I've done that is because I want us to explore the relationship between the priests and the Levites. So what I've shown is that 2019, that marked the close of probation for the priests. And it's a point in time. 2 years later begins the close of probation for the Levites. And the close of probation for the Levites is also a period of time and it has similar characteristics to the first work of the priests. So the priests join the movement one after the other, as shown here. And the Levites join the movement also one after the other. So if this was a picture of these two groups joining the movement, 1, 2, 3. These are the priests joining one after the other. And if this was a story of the Levites, they too join one after the other. But there are subtle differences between the two groups. The priests, they join the movement during their probationary time. So we mark the close of probation here. But the Levites, when they join the movement, they join the movement after the close of probation. So for the Levites, it's after the close of probation, and for the priests, it's before. But they both join progressively. And if you look at the history of the Nethinims, or the world, you'll see that they too join progressively. And they too join after the close of their probation. They join after the close of their probation as well. So there's a subtle difference between the priests and then the Levites and Nethinims. And the difference is priests join before their close of probation, and the next two groups join after their close of probation. But everybody joins progressively. Now people become confused why we say that the priest's probation closes at a point and the probation of the Levites is progressive. But if we don't think about it in those terms, if we say that this is a story of joining the church, if this is the story of joining, then everyone joins in the same way, progressively. But the experience, the dispensation of when you join is different. Priests before, Levites and Nethinim after. So hopefully that's clear. By the way, if people have questions, can they please write them out and give them to one of the organizers? So we can try to address those questions that you might have. So when you look at this story here, you see that the Levites and Nethinims come immediately one after the other. You'll see that the Levites and Nethinims join one after the other immediately. But there's a gap between when the priests join and when these other two groups join. This period of time here. And the question is, why is this period existing? Why is there this gap? That's what we're addressing in our studies. So we have the priests, and then we have the Levites and Nethinims. And this is the story of joining. And why is there this space? That's what we're trying to address. So, this picture that we've got here is what we had drawn here. We have the close of probation for the priests here. Then the close of probation for the Levites. And we've said that it's a point. And it's a period for the Levites. So this picture is the same as the one we had yesterday. This is what we drew yesterday. And so the question is, why is there this 2-year period? Why is there a delay before the Levites join us? So we began to try to explain that. Before we did that, we discussed the misconception that many people have. Each of us has experienced joining and leaving. Many of us may have left the conference church, joined this movement. Some of us have been baptized. Some of us are waiting to be baptized. Within our movement, there has also been a work of separation. People who had joined our movement, some of them have left. And so we have, in this time period, this separation that's occurring. So we want to explain why this separation has happened. If you were to go to Desire of Ages, page 333, Ellen White will comment on the major parables of Christ. And one of the ones that she discusses is the parable of the wheat and tares, taken from Matthew 13. She says the purpose of that parable is to teach us a certain truth. And she calls it the great separation. Now, what I recommend that we need to do, if you want to understand this parable, Matthew 13, verses 24 to 30, is that you should go to 2 camp meetings, 2 series. So I'll put a star here, and that one will go down to here. So the first one that you should go to is Kenya, November 2018. And the second one you should go to is France, December 2019. And we didn't discuss those yesterday. These 2 camp meetings, they will discuss Matthew 13, 24 to 30. The parable of the tares. If you go to Kenya, this was a school of the prophets. It was 1 month long. So what you need to go to are the Sabbath meetings. And I think there were 3 of them. It's not the whole school. The one last year, that was a 7-part series, I think, all about this subject. So if you want to understand Matthew 13, Parable of the Tares, this is where you would go. And if you went here, what you would see is that there is a separation that's identified as occurring in God's church. But that separation is not the separation that we see in this 5-year period. It's not the separation of you leaving the conference structure. And it's not the separation of those people who have left this movement. Now, if you want to understand this separation and the 2 passages that we went to, Great Controversy 608, Testimonies of the Church, Volume 8, page 41, then for that information, if you want to understand the separation, then you need to go to another series. This is Uganda. School of the Prophets. And this is January 2020. Last month. This is the school that we just had in Ginger. Maybe I'll take out the School of the Prophets because it's the camp meeting as well. So it'll be January and February 2020. And there we discussed this work of separation. So there are 2 separations that are being brought to view. One that's in Matthew 13 and one that's in the Spirit of Prophecy. Now, the question that we want to address is, why is there this period of waiting? And I gave the reason for that. Here. This last priest that's come in, this priest is not fully trained, and they're not ready to do the work of teaching, of instructing. So this time period here is designed for the priests who come here at the end to be trained, because they haven't been in the movement long enough. So we had it here. The reason is this, because people are not sufficiently trained. That's what this period is for. And so we've done it here. We said that the priests come in. There's this last one here. In this picture, it's number 3. We've got the last priest, and they're joining just before the close of probation. And the close of probation is a shut door. So we're adding more and more information to our model. So this period here from 2019 to 2021, which we call the harvest of the priests, when you consider that period as the close of probation, it's only a point. So everybody's case is already decided. So you're familiar with the parable of those people who work for a farmer. And some of them come at the beginning of the day, and some of them come at the end of the day. So if you take that concept, some people come at the beginning, number 1, and some people come at the end, number 3. And in that parable, if you've worked all day, or you've just worked for an hour, if you've been in that field for 12 hours or 1 hour, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference? No. You all get paid the same amount, don't you? We agree with that? So, if we think about that penny that they all receive as a certificate, a reward, let's not think about it as money. Let's think about it as a ticket. Or a certificate. Everybody gets the same certificate or the same ticket. It's like an examination where you either pass or you fail. So everyone has passed, they've all been rewarded. And they all receive the same reward. So whether you join this movement at the very beginning, 30 years ago, or you join at the very end, everyone is considered a priest. And that's where that story ends. The parable that Christ gives us. So we want to take that model that all of us, wherever you came into the movement, are all priests. We're all equal. We don't have two types of priests. Like a superior or a clever priest and an inferior or a ignorant priest. At this level, in this story, everyone is equal. They all have the same title. Now the problem is, when you're going to ask those people to begin to do a work, that not everybody is trained. They're not able to share this message with people. So this period, same period here, identified here. This is a period of training or preparation for the priests, particularly those who have come in at the end. Now what's interesting is that those people who came at the beginning, you might think they have an advantage because they've been here a long time. So you might say, if I'd come in at the beginning, it would be easier for me. It's too difficult because I came here at the end. And of course that's not true. There's no advantage if you came here at the beginning. In fact, there's disadvantages. Now I want to take this period of time, and as I've shown up here, I want to divide it into two parts. So this is this, 19, COP, 19 COP, and I want to break it into two parts. And this way mark is this one here, that I've called Sunday law. And this is 89. So I've taken this, where everyone's joining, and I've broken it into two parts. So you've got priests joining in this history, and then you've got priests joining in this history. And when we said last, when we said the last priest, talking about this group specifically, we'll call this the first group. So you might think, if you're here at the beginning, you're at an advantage, and you're not. The problem is if you joined here in the early days, when you come towards the end, and you come into our history here, the period where we've got a question mark, you're having to unlearn many of the things that you've been taught. So you see the work of separation that we've identified here, and you see it's specifically this time period where we've got last. So this separation period occurs here. And the reason why it's occurring in the movement is because this first group, they're not willing to unlearn. They're not willing to change. So for those of you who came in at the end, it's much easier. You don't have to unlearn things that you learned in the movement. However, There are many things that were learnt here. The people who are new don't understand. And this period here, this 2-year period that we have, it's to get everybody up to speed so that we're all equal. And I can't stress this enough. In this room, I know there's over 100 people here. And more than 90% of you fall into this category. I don't think there are even more than 10 of us who are in this group. And this training period that's been given to us, it looks long, 2 years, but it's not. You have very little time to prepare. And therefore this work of education must happen very rapidly. And this becomes much harder than you might think. Because we're at a place now where, in our experience, we've come to a time period where God is giving light very quickly to his movement. And we keep on producing more and more information. It's only the second week of February, and I think we've already approaching 100 presentations just for this year. So this is around 110, 120 hours of material just for 2020. So it can become very difficult to keep up with all the information. And the problem is you can't afford to miss anything. Now, I'm not suggesting that everyone has to watch every video. But everybody needs to know what was taught on all of the videos that have been uploaded, that have been produced. We're all familiar with the Midnight Cry message. There are nearly 300 hours of material just on that Midnight Cry message. There are nearly 300 hours of material. Now, in this congregation, we have Bible workers. We have people who understand this message. And this is a word of instruction and also of admonition to those people. Admonition is a soft way of telling people off. When you consider the amount of work that needs to be done, and you consider the responsibility of being a Bible worker, this is not a time period for those people who are in full-time ministry to start presenting their own thoughts and their own ideas. of what they think is right or what they think is wrong. In my opinion, it's the height of selfishness when you have access to truth, which we know that God is giving to his movement, and rather than sharing that light, you decide to share your own light. You want to study for yourself and share your thoughts rather than teaching those who need your help. The established light that everyone knows God is giving to this movement. It's not like there's plenty of time and there's not enough to present. I hope I make myself clear. The expectation of a teacher in this movement especially in this critical time period, is not to start creating and sharing their own thoughts and ideas of what's right and wrong, but it's to recognize the message of the hour, understand it for yourself, and share it with your fellow brothers and sisters. There's not enough time just to do that, let alone to study things of your own devisings, trying to develop those studies and push people in a direction which looks like new light. We're doing a disservice to God's movement if we know what is being taught by the people that God is leading, and rather than teach that, we choose to teach our own thoughts and ideas. We don't have the opportunity all the time to do that. So coming back to our recap, this is the time of training and preparation for the priests. For the first group, a work of unlearning needs to be done, as well as learning. And for this last group, the last priests, they need to be trained to be brought up to speed so that no one is at a disadvantage, so that we have a fully prepared priesthood to go to the Levites. Every single one of you has an obligation not only to teach but to learn. That's this point here. God created this line. He has directed the work of humanity, and He has seen fit to give us this short time period to get ready. Therefore, we must have faith that it's enough time. However young you are, however old you are, whether you have a family or you're single, God has decreed, He's given us this time period, and therefore we must know that it's enough time. There's a second problem. Particularly this verse group here. But many of this last group, when they joined this movement, they brought many false ideas with them. Many misconceptions. This first group, when they began to teach this message, they thought it was wise for them to incorporate all these wrong ideas into the message. And so what we ended up with is a movement of priests that was broken and damaged. We had a priesthood that was patriarchal. Patriarchs? That was focused upon the needs of men. That was run by men. And women were considered to be underneath men. They needed to be in subjection to men. These thoughts and ideas, which these people had brought into the movement, were taught at a personal and doctrinal level. This was all based upon wrong ideas or misconceptions of inspiration. As an example, the leading ministry in this movement, Future for America, had a church fellowship associated with them. And every Sabbath, after the Sabbath school, where you had the divine hour service, they would only have men do that service. Women were excluded to do the divine hour meeting. And nobody thought anything of that. Nobody raised a complaint. Many people didn't even notice. And obviously the architects of that program that preaching roster, they thought that was a good idea. They thought they were fulfilling God's will. So we have a secondary problem in our movement. We have a secondary problem in our movement. First problem, the priests have not been here long enough to be trained. This is a phenomenon that God has created. It's part of the structure of these lines. But there's a secondary problem, a bigger problem. And this is the problem of gender inequality. We have a movement that has half of its members women, systematically undertrained, not given the opportunity of developing their teaching ability to the degree that we have a large disparity between men and women. And this problem has been created, as I said yesterday, by the leadership of this movement. Those people who came here in this history, they imprinted an image of God that was wrong. This image of God was stamped upon the hearts and the minds of the priesthood, and the representation of God that was given is wrong. So we've come to a place now, in this period of waiting, that we need to take the opportunity to train and prepare the sisters for work. The reason why we have so much damage is because there was a culture in our movement that women were suppressed. And this culture was fostered and encouraged at the highest level of our movement. So God has given us, every single one of us, the opportunity to correct that mistake. So we have been freed from those leading brethren who would oppose this work. Those who created and promulgated those damaging ideas. They've left the movement. They've separated. And so we've come to a time where we have to train all of the priests. You have heard that experience, that work, in the following word: equality. So when you hear the word equality, the reason why we need equality in our movement, because we can't afford to have half of the priests not properly trained. And the reason we see that has occurred is because the movement itself has done that damage. So in this history, from 19 to 21, this is why you see us focusing on preaching rosters, on ensuring that women have leadership positions, that wives and daughters are treated properly in their homes, that we're prepared to discipline men who mistreat women in their homes, and whilst we've been here in Africa to address the issue of dowry, which is just a very clever word of actually saying slavery or human trafficking. So we want the movement to be clear how we view that practice. We can no longer accept the practice of human trafficking. And everybody knows that it's wrong. Because if the human trafficking was based upon color or one tribe trafficking another tribe, no one would tolerate such behavior. But based upon a wrong understanding, based upon the excuse of religion, men think it's acceptable to abuse women. And so we have come out to make a clear statement that those men who traffic women cannot and should not be part of this movement. So we discussed this training period. We discussed why it has occurred. Because the movement has not trained its members. So we are now focused to correct those errors. It's surprising to me why there is so much resistance, both by men and quite often by women, that they don't actually recognize the necessity of doing this. Whilst we're focused on this training, of this work of preparation, in the time period of Jacob's trouble, of Elijah's trouble, these people here who helped create this atmosphere, this culture in our movement, they've continued to cause trouble. And whilst we're busy preparing, what they're doing is, based upon other false ideas, primarily time, and geography or location, they've developed a prediction that Islam is going to attack the United States on July 18th this year. Now, this prediction in and of itself doesn't hurt us. Because we're in the work of preparation. But the problem is that these people are going to hurt and damage other people. Now, I'm not sure why, but there are people who actually think that there is some merit to this prediction. They seem beguiled, deceived. They seem beguiled by the false ideas of Future for America. In the same way, many people were beguiled by their false ideas on equality. So we want to spend some time addressing this issue. Whilst God expects us to prepare, they're busily doing false predictions. Ellen White calls the time period that we're in Jacob's time of trouble. Of course, when we do that, we have fractalized the experience or the line of God's people that we're given in great controversy. So in this period here, that's called Jacob's time of trouble, I've called Elijah's time of trouble. Because Elijah is one of the prophets that explains or shows us what actually happens in this history. And it's an ugly picture. The ugliness is not how ugly the world is. The ugliness is in the realization that Elijah has failed in his mission and the bitter experience that he needs to go through. I'm not sure why, but Adventists, probably like yourself, think that when Michael stands up in Daniel 12:1, and we flee to the mountains, we'll be satisfied with the good work that we've done. And God will complete this last work, protecting us in the cleft of the rock, whilst he destroys all the enemies. Now that might be one perspective that you like, but it's not the complete story of that history. There's another version, a darker, more ugly one. A version of failure, of not having faith. of past mistakes that have not been fixed and sorted out. Far too often, we want to take the perspective that's given to us in the great controversy or the book of Revelation. We want the plague version. We like that version because we see ourselves separate from the world, and the world is being punished and destroyed by God's wrath. And we say they deserve that. We will be protected and hidden and shielded from that. Now that's one version, but I want to suggest that's the peace and safety version. The version that we should focus on, that we should be paying attention to, is the version that's given in the story of Jacob. The reason it's called Jacob's time of trouble is because who's in trouble? Jacob or his brother? Jacob or his family? Jacob or his wicked, horrible father-in-law? Jacob or the world? We all know that the person that's in trouble is Jacob, and his life is in danger. And this is after the close of probation. Our concepts, our ideas, even of Daniel 12:1, even of Revelation 22 verse 11, they're very shallow and twisted. I was to consider the story of these two men. Why is Jacob's life in danger? Do we know why? Now you might say, well, his brother's pursuing him. Why can't God protect him? Let me ask you a question if you believe that. This is the night of his trouble. The night of trouble. He begins to fight here. We'll call it the Alpha. And he ends his fight here, the Omega. At the beginning, he is scared of his brother. What's his brother going to do? He's come to kill him, isn't he? He's come to kill him here. And Jacob is scared. He fights with the angel. And by the time he gets to the end, Jacob has changed. What's his brother doing? Has his brother changed? No. What's he going to do? He's still coming to kill him. Jacob knew he was going to kill him then, and he knew he was going to kill him then. So why is Jacob happy now? He never received any assurance that everything was going to be okay. He doesn't know that his brother's going to be held back and restrained. So in this story, it's not about the brother. The problem is not the world. The problem is the priest. And why is he so scared and worried here? This is the close of probation. Now if you go back to Bethel, what did he do at Bethel? Justification by faith. So, he's justified here. We would call it becoming a Christian. And then, he has all of this trouble. And in this trouble, what's his conduct? Good or bad? So it's a mixture. Surface reading, you would indicate, or you would think that he was good. But he still is holding on to many things. Many cherished ideas which are wrong. And by the time he gets to here, to midnight, his time of trouble, he is scared. And why is he scared? He's not scared of his brother. He's scared because his relationship with God is not right. And this is after his probation has closed. Ellen White will tell you it's at this point, we would call it the harvest, that he actually comes to a place where he finally gets rid of his sin problem. The way she expresses it, he relinquishes cherished sins. The relinquishment happens here. And the reason it's happening is because of external forces. He's been forced to make these decisions. He struggles in this history. Struggling with whom? With God. Does he even know what God looks like? Does he? No. He thinks God is his enemy. Many of us in this room think that as well. When God has instructed us to train the people, particularly the sisters, many of the brethren here, they think this must be against God's order. Surely this can't be correct. And so people now are fighting with an enemy. And the story clearly tells you who they're fighting with. With God. So if you believe in line upon line, you'll say that you do. Don't go to the pretty story in Great Controversy, chapter 39. Where the bad people are in the world. Go to the story at the beginning. Where you are the bad person. You're the one that's in trouble. And you don't even trust in God. In fact, you don't even know what He looks like. And instead of fighting against the world, which you're supposed to do, you find that the priest is actually fighting against God. This movement is wrestling against God at the same time that they claim to be faithful. And you know, in the times of ignorance, God could wink at us. And it's not that you're ignorant. We were told about this issue way back here in this history before we entered into the time of trouble. Every one of us was warned what the issues were. And now, where God wants to change us, we find ourselves fighting against Him, questioning Him. This is what we need to understand. Future for America are out of control. They're just doing their own thing at the time period where they should be wrestling with God. They will never realize who God is. You and I have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to stop fighting against Him, to stop resisting Him. The problem is, many of us think this is a distraction. Jacob's brother is coming to kill Jacob, his family, everything that he considers dear. And in the midst of all of that, all this is a distraction, isn't it? It's a distraction. Having a conversation with God. He should have been asking God, sort my brother out. Protect my children. What does he care about? What does he care about? Look how selfish he is. He didn't say, God, protect my family, don't worry about me. What did he say? Bless me. It's all about me, not about anyone else. We should try to understand that story in order for your family to be safe. You need to receive a blessing from God. The only way you're going to be blessed is when you stop fighting against Him. And the reason we're fighting is because the person who's our friend, we actually think is our enemy. The other story that comes to our attention is Elijah. And Elijah in this time period is running scared. Why? He was doing so well. here on Mount Carmel against the false prophets. And now he's running scared because he's failed in his duty. We too have failed in our duty. And this is a time period where God is going to restore us. This is not a time period where we're coming up with new fanciful predictions. I really cannot emphasize strongly enough how much danger every single one of you is in. If you're a teacher, look at the work that lies closest. You have a responsibility to teach those who don't understand this message. We have too much material already. There's not enough time in one day to teach what we currently have. Stop spending time trying to find new things. For those of us who are wrestling, who are fighting and resisting against the subject of equality, realize that your enemy, the one that you think is your enemy, is actually God. You're fighting against him in fighting against these truths. Each of us needs to come to a place where we realize that the most important thing in this history is what? That God would bless us. This is the only opportunity that you have left. This short window of opportunity to receive a blessing from him. And the only way you will ever receive that is if, like Jacob, you're willing to put away your cherished sins. And if you think the price is too high, it's too painful, Jacob was crippled for the rest of his life. And every time he walked, it hurt. He didn't just have a limp. God ensured that it was painful for the rest of his life every time he walked. That's the kind of God we serve. He presses the pain so that we don't forget. So if you find the sacrifice of equality too much, you'll not receive the blessing. You'll fail the test. And if you think the price is too high, remember that Jacob had permanent scars through this experience. He wasn't the same person afterwards that he was before. There were good things that happened. He was blessed. He knew who he was. But he had to pay a price for that. And that price followed him for the rest of his life. Don't count the cost of equality. Rather embrace it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness, your watch care over your people. Lord, as we realize the very short time that we have, perhaps in a way that we haven't understood before, may the Holy Spirit continue to impress upon our hearts and our minds the necessity of change. Lord, if we have been fighting against you, thinking that you are our enemy, may we spend a few moments here kneeling before you, repenting and changing. Lord, for those of us of experience in this movement, in these truths, those of us who are quick of mind, may we spend our time here at this convocation helping and assisting those who don't understand what's being taught, who don't have clarity on these issues. Be with us and bless us, Father. We thank you in Jesus' name.